Welcome, everyone, and especially the warmest welcome to Rachelle. I am so excited that we're doing this event. There was such synchronicity about this coming together. And I mentioned this if anyone was there on our Instagram Live, but Rachelle has been researching plant-based protein for years and has yet to do an event where all of that research and culminated work has been unveiled. And so Rachelle, you had planned to do an event on protein and reached out to me, and I was like, I'm doing an event on protein. And so it was this perfect synchronicity. And yeah, it feels like such an important time to be having this conversation. As I mentioned, if you were here a few minutes early, we encourage lots of questions and we'll leave time at the end for a Q&A. Thank you also to everyone that sent me questions beforehand. We have a ton of inquiries from you all, so we'll cover as much as we can. I will let you know that this is going to be recorded, so if you have to go and run to the restroom or run out, you will be sent an email from me tomorrow, which has a recording of this webinar. And I do have to say, while Rachelle and I are both nutritionists and herbalists, we are not your healthcare practitioner. And so if you do have specific questions about unique ailments or specific herbs and interacting with your body, we have to recommend a healthcare practitioner, and we're both happy to do that, whether it's working with Rachelle after this or recommending someone in our network. But beyond that, we can answer many other questions. And yeah, I want to share with you all a little bit about Rachelle, and then I'll let you take it away for a moment, and we have so much to cover. So for those of you that are new to either of us, my name's Danielle. I'm kind of our host tonight, but I'll be interacting with Rachelle as well. I'm a holistic nutritionist and registered herbalist, and at Sigmatic, I'm our national educator. And Rachelle is a holistic healthcare practitioner, clinical herbalist, and the founder of Supernatural, which is a cafe and apothecary where all are welcome to learn more about the power of plants. Rachelle combines her knowledge of herbal and traditional medicine, plant-based nutrition, and habit remodeling into holistic solutions for busy individuals seeking best being in their bodies and minds. She maintains a private coaching practice in New York and is the mastermind behind Herbals, which if we have time, we should pull out because they're amazing. But it's an herbal remedy gummy there's one for stress and anxiety and another for energy and endurance. And her passions include publishing, teaching, speaking, well-being advocacy, and exploring plants in faraway places. We are so grateful to have you with us, Rachelle. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here.
Yes. So is there anything you want to say before we just jump in, kind of set the stage of what we're doing tonight?
I mean, no, just because I'm so excited to jump in, but I think just to reiterate what you mentioned, protein is kind of always top of mind in this work and in this world and in the world. And you're right, I had been compiling notes for a long time and had lots of people requesting it always, and this is really the opportunity to kind of come out with the synthesis of what we know and where we're at and what the recommendations are, and I'm really excited to do that. So
let's just jump in. And people are saying hi to us from all over. So hi from Canada and Seattle and Florida. We're grateful you're all here. What is protein? So start with the foundation of why we're all here.
Yeah. Well, protein is a macronutrient. And a macronutrient would be, one of the main components of sort of nutrition or diet, or what our body needs to build things and be alive and have energy. So the other macronutrients are carbohydrates, fat, and there's protein. There's really only three. I do like to think that fiber should be the fourth one, but that's a separate webinar.
I love that, and how that ties into plant-based protein, and we'll talk about the benefits and fiber being part of that. But yeah, I think it's important to recognize, just as you said, protein builds us. So where the other macronutrients have kind of had their moments in the corner where they've been shamed, you don't want carbohydrates, fat is the devil, like all these different things. Protein has kind of remained, we say at Four Sigmatic, like the golden child. And there's good reason for that, which we'll dive into. But beyond, so much of the time, people are like, do I just need protein if I'm a bodybuilder and I'm working out? And it's like, protein builds all of us. So regardless of what, and we'll talk about individualistic, where you live and what else you eat and your exercise level, your age, your gender, etc. But really for all of us, it's the building blocks of so many functions in our body. And so, whether it's hormonal production and nerves, there are these essential building blocks to what makes us us, right?
Yeah.
They build us.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, and so that reminds me of, the importance of amino acids in the conversation, and amino acids being the building blocks of protein and many other things. But, if we eat protein, then our body breaks it down into amino acids. And there's the whole conversation about complete proteins and getting your amino acids, from different foods or in a complete food. And I like to reference the documentary What the Health, actually, that they do a really good job of explaining, how amino acids are ultimately what we're after when we're eating protein or any of these other macronutrients, because those are what, our body breaks these things down into and then stores a pool of, and then reallocates into muscle, neurotransmitters, whatever else we're building. So I have lots of thoughts about amino acids, but I'm also curious. I was really eager as I was putting my notes together to hear your approach to the amino acids as well, because clearly you guys were really mindful of that.
Yeah, and I had so many questions prior to this webinar of, can you explain the difference between plant-based protein and animal protein, whey protein versus plant-based protein? And really one of the biggest differentiators is the amount of amino acids. And so oftentimes when we look at more animal-focused proteins, they have the essential amino acids, meaning it's a complete protein. So for those that are new to this word essential, anytime from a dietary perspective we hear the word essential, it means that our body can't produce it on its own or convert other compounds to make it on our own. So we must get it from the food that we're eating, right? If you've heard of, our omegas, right? Essential fats within our amino acids, there are few that are essential. And so when you have a plant, or when you have an animal protein, you often get all of the essential amino acids in one fell swoop, while you may be missing many other things. When you're looking at plant-based protein, it's hard to just pinpoint one plant. There's few plants that have all of the essential amino acids, which is why we combine different plants, right? At Four Sigmatic, we chose 5 plant-based vegan sources so that we can have that balanced amino acid profile, so that you can get a complete protein through a vegan source.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say that while it's true that a complete protein with all of the essential amino acids is necessary for us to sort of utilize it entirely, or for it to really be, complete, the idea that we have to get them all in one serving at one time is a myth. And there's so it's not a criticism, but it's really important because it's a myth that's persisted for decades. And I think now it's pretty easy, if you Google the complete protein myth, you can see sort of how it's been really just re-explained. Somebody didn't sort of intend to make it doctrine, but it got taken out of context and became that. So it is true that we have to accumulate these different amino acids as we eat the plants, and it's really convenient and great when they're in a single food. but our body doesn't require that. It can be over the course of 24, 36 hours. So I like to encourage people who are really worried about like, well, this isn't a complete protein. I have to have beans with my quinoa. It's like, no, you don't. You know, if you have a varied, high quality diet, and it can be entirely plant-based if you want, you can get your complete protein assembled that way. The other thing that, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm so glad you brought that up, because being a primarily plant-based eater for over 20 years, there's this idea like you have to have rice and beans together, and that's the only way that you're going to meet your complete protein. And you're right, that's a myth. You know, you can have one of these ingredients, you know, for breakfast and the other for dinner or the next day, and you can still meet those nutritional needs and all those 9 essential amino acids without it being in every single bite that you're taking. So such an important thing to bring up.
It's liberating. Yes. You know, it makes being more plant-based possible too. It's like, oh, I have like 36 hours to get this done, you know, which is also like a loose number. It's like we just, you know, the body's accumulating them over time. So I feel like that's really helpful to know. And then I think the other point that I just like to mention about amino acids is that, which I guess we sort of touched on it, but you know, the body isn't building things out of protein, and it's not storing the protein, you know, it's storing it as amino acids. So anyway, just sort of reiterates the importance of those. And then also that if you're having a protein supplement, one that is mindful enough to have considered the amino acid makeup is really great. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of leads into our next topic, which is like, okay, we know what protein is. We have this macronutrient. It's when the building blocks of this protein are amino acids. We can get our amino acids in many different, there's amino acids in almost every plant, right? So it's this combination that's important. And let's talk a little bit more about the why, like why we need it. Why is protein important, and how it actually functions in the body?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the why, I think we might have sort of answered that already in terms of it being such a fundamental building block, you know, and we only have the sort of the three macronutrients to work with. And well, yeah, I mean, I would say that it's sort of a fundamental like piece of nutrition. I will say that especially as I've been kind of compiling this research and practicing it and diving into it, the necessity of the quantity is much, much less than we have been sort of marketed to over time. So it's super important, but the quantity is less, it's less important that we have the quantity we think that we've been told we need. I'll take it over to you to respond. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that, because and in this we can weave in, which both of us really follow in our practice and in our life, is this understanding that every body is unique. And so whether that comes with our herbal medicine that we love, our beloved plants and our mushrooms, there isn't like, no matter who you are, this is the proper dose. And that's part of the magic of holistic healthcare and nutrition, is that I think of it a lot like matchmaking, you know? So based on your body's changing, our bodies are constantly changing as we go from season to season, as we change climate. So someone like me living at, you know, almost 6,000 feet elevation versus Rachelle at sea level in New York City, there's differing needs when we are putting things in our body to nourish us. And even if we were experiencing, even if we had the same, you know, exercise level or stress level, we would still require differing nutrients, whether it's in the form of our macronutrients, our micronutrients, to function optimally. So small disclaimer as we talk about like how much we need to know that the goal is always to find what's right for your body, and how can we give everyone tools to better listen to their body, you know, and know what their body needs, connect to what feels good and what doesn't. And I think that's one of the biggest keys in feeling more energized, having better sleep, really just being a more vital human, is being our own best advocate and knowing what our body is telling us at different times.
Yeah. And I think we'll get to it. I definitely have like a dozen. I did sort of a tour of like a dozen different calculators, because there's all this like, how much do I need? How many grams? What percentage of my diet? Blah blah blah. And I can share really explicitly what, you know, the different schools of thought think on that. I think we'll get to that a little bit later when we get into the more specifically, you know, how much you need. I think to highlight sort of what I've found, so we need it, you know, we don't need very much. We do really, really need good quality protein when we're having it. And there's pretty scary, you know, results in studies on high protein diets that are high animal food protein diets. And I do not advocate that everybody has to be vegetarian or vegan. That's not, you know, that's not what we're saying. But what it looks like to have a high protein or a moderate protein diet that's animal based versus plant based is completely different. And it's scary versus great. So one thing that I would say is, you know, if people are kind of considering, you know, for Sigmatic protein or a plant-based protein product, replacing animal with that could be a really, really good idea. And I don't think we probably won't get into all of that, like the science today, but it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Tangent there.
when it comes to quality, I mean, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I wonder, what are the key things that you would point out of this is high quality and this isn't?
Yeah. Protein specifically, or just kind of, well, I mean, I can take that and say, you know, I would say protein specifically, I would consider in the same way that I would consider food, which is the same criteria that I give people when they're looking at herbal supplements or vitamins and supplements in general. And one thing that's a big factor is just where you're at with what your priorities are and what you can afford and what you want to afford. And some people want, you know, organic, and some people don't want organic and they just want, you know, an upgrade from where they're at. So there's definitely where are you, and taking one step or two steps or five forward is, you know, the right move, even if it's not sort of all the way. And then plant-based is huge, you know, it's huge. Especially if protein is something that you're pursuing on a regular basis, you're trying to make it part of your diet, you know, which we can talk about that maybe tonight. But if it's something you're intentionally seeking, then intentionally making it plant-based can be really, really, really beneficial for your health. And then we look at the sourcing. Yeah, where does it come from? How is it processed? Is it an isolated extract from, you know, like, is it whey is like, you know, isolating one kind of component and it becomes not even really natural at that point? You know, it's like what we do when we do medicines and things, we isolate compounds, versus pumpkin and pea and coconut, like what you have, you know, ground up. So whole food. Yeah, I think then it depends on if you want to do organic or wild harvested or these different things. What about you? What's quality in your mind?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the isolates, and this speaks to so many people that asked me about whey protein before this, but it's really the biggest difference when it comes to kind of allopathic, more of our current Western model versus a holistic approach, right? And it's when we're using whole forms of foods, there isn't just one compound that, so even though we're pointing out protein today, hopefully you're gathering that it's not just protein. Like when you break down protein, there's all these amino acids. And the biggest difference that I see when it comes to animal versus plant-based protein is all of the other things that you're getting from these plant-based sources, right? So it's this idea when we're eating a lot of meat and cheese, for example, it's really highly caloric, but lower in terms of its nutrient density, especially when it comes to micronutrients. So yes, you might be getting a equal amount of protein or even fats. But when it comes to the fiber, the vitamins, the minerals, all of the other hundreds of compounds that comprise a whole food based plant form, there's so much more that you're getting, you know, so it's a lot lower in its caloric density, but it's exponentially higher in terms of all of the other constituents that make up that ingredient. And yeah, the of course the organic, and I love when you said meet people where they're at, and I couldn't like pound in this point more. It's fascinating. We can go through different stories of, you know, both being in clinical practice, and when you try to do something that's too far from where you're at, like I'm all of a sudden going to only have plant-based protein and cut out gluten and do all these things. It's like not going to last. And part of what we're here to do as holistic practitioners is create long-term solutions. So it isn't that there's a magic pill. It's how can we take that one step at a time, which results in health in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, rather than just maybe you feel better tomorrow, but it suppresses a symptom deeper.
Yeah. All for it. So true.
Should we jump into, what do you want to jump into?
How much do we need? Is that next?
Yeah. How much do we need? What's the truth about this?
Is everybody ready? This is why we're all here, right? How much protein do I need? Somebody tell me finally once and for all. Well, it depends. Sorry, but it doesn't depend that much, actually. So here's some things to consider when you're trying to figure out how much protein you need. How much do you weigh? How much of what you weigh is lean body mass? So when you're calculating, a lot of times what's recommended is to look at lean body mass as opposed to total body mass. And I won't get into how to calculate that, but there's lots of easy ways to do that online. How old are you? If you are over 65 or 75 years old, when weight starts to decline, then it's advised generally that you'll need more protein then. That's way later than people generally think, but that's what consistently comes up as, like, if you're over that age, you know, body weight starts to decline, so you need more protein. If you're breastfeeding, if you're pregnant, if you're a super high performing athlete, or you're trying to push your body beyond normal high performance. So I think that's really important. You know, if you exercise every single day, you know, once a day, that doesn't necessarily mean you need more protein. If you exercise like twice a day, or like long sessions or your training, then you may need more, but the barrier is higher than we generally think in terms of who needs more. How active are you? Those are the big things. So body weight, activity level, and also your goals. Are you trying to maintain your weight? Are you trying to gain weight? Are you trying to lose weight or change your body composition from fat to protein, or fat to muscle, for example?
Yes.
Anything else there in the considerations that you wanted to add that I didn't mention?
I think about the time of year and seasonality, and that's more about the protein choices, like what sources you're choosing to get them from. In the middle of the summer when it's really hot out, versus, you know, the dark winter months. And again, that's totally intricately related to how much we're exercising or moving. And I love that you brought up what are your goals? Like, are you trying to maintain your weight? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to gain weight? But yeah, those are great foundational things to assess. Everyone can take notes and say, okay, like this is my age group. This is how much I exercise. Just kind of get your building blocks to assess for yourself.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing that I think is important to consider is, so we often think of it as how many grams per day do I need?
Right.
And I would like to encourage people to think of it rather as, it's a little bit harder. It's not quite as easy as grams, and you can get your own grams, but percentage of your daily intake of calories or food. You don't have to track calories to know this, but a percentage. Because again, you know, if you, Danielle, need, 54 grams of protein per day, it doesn't mean that that's what I need too, gram wise, so if we kind of look at percentage, because what you're eating, and this kind of goes back to the nutrient density conversation that you were mentioning earlier, daily calories vary widely depending on how high quality the food is too. So really looking at protein as sort of a percent of everything you have in the day, as opposed to like a gram number. Now, if you really don't want to do that, that's fine. You can kind of use these calculations to get to a gram, but I would encourage that mindset. It's the same thing that, I've been really trying to encourage clients lately to aim for, 75% of the plate is vegetables or produce, and when we're thinking in percentages, it can be easier than like cups or grams or calories or things. You sort of look at, your plate and you say, okay, well, the majority of it's veggies.
I love that. And I love knowing that, seeing your meals all the time on social. And we love the same cookbook. Shout out to Six Seasons.
Yeah.
Looking at, it's not take out any animal products, like make it really clear we're not saying that. It's all of us, we agree, need more plants in our diets, right? Especially in the West. And let's debunk the myth that, we need protein in every single meal, and be able to know that we can meet our nutritional needs and maybe even more of them if we add more plants, right? Plant forward plates.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, on that note, for just like for one quick tangent, the amount of energy that is spent thinking about getting our protein needs, if we could spend that amount of energy like getting our plant needs, that that would be energy better spent. We can have the protein too, but it's like that there's definitely been, and I think it's a little bit more of like the marketing maybe to blame. In the past, there's the focus on high fat or low fat, high carb or low carb, and right now it's like making sure that we get our protein. And really, I think what we're talking about, tonight especially, is like making sure we get our good quality protein, and that upgrade. Yeah. So I'm looking at my notes here. I actually did like write this up into a whole sort of article, so I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically of probably a dozen or so different sources, from the China study and T. Colin Campbell, the Hippocrates Institute, people like Ben Greenfield and Gundry, and just everybody who's talking about protein these days. There wasn't a huge variance in recommendations, but the average of it all was that about 12.5% of daily calories should come from protein. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, if you're somebody who eats about 1,200 calories a day, which is pretty low for a lot of people. But if you eat 1,200 calories a day and you don't want to change your body composition, that would come out to be 37 grams of protein per day. So pretty, like, not a big surprise, but when you hear 12.5% of daily, caloric intake is coming from protein, I think that sounds way lower than what most people think. And tell me, I mean, guys in the chat and in Q&A, let me know if that's surprising or not. But that's sort of where we land. And that, just a little caveat there, that is not correcting for lean body mass. That's like total body weight. So it actually would be a little bit lower than that. So I'll just leave that there for a second. What do you think? I mean, I'm sure you guys have done this 100 different ways already. So
yeah, I love the shift of thinking about it in terms of percentages. And I think that makes way more sense. We're really hyper-focused on grams, but that's inaccessible. Like, especially when you're, frying an egg or having some chicken on your salad, like we don't necessarily know how many grams. So I think tools like that to help us assess on our own and not need to constantly Google something or look at our nutrition book, but say, okay, how much of this is, considered protein, and then just redefining what protein looks like. So knowing that There are amino acids in almost everything we're eating, and this diversity could not be more important. And today's Rowan is asking an interesting question, which totally varies based on your source. How many calories in each gram of protein?
Yeah, so it's 4, let me double check, but it's 4 grams of 4 calories per gram of protein. But I'll triple check that. Yeah, I have it here in my notes. I just have so many notes.
Yeah, and Eve is asking, how does this compare to what the normal recommendations are? And if you, and I'll give my piece and then I'll pass off to you, Rachelle, but if you look at, you're an average, you exercise, maybe a few times a week, you're trying to maintain your body weight. The rough calculations are you take your weight and you divide it in half, and that's the amount of grams of protein you should be having a day. So let's say you're a 150-pound woman, you cut that in half, you should be having 75 grams of protein a day. Like, it's kind of
you're saying that's the general, or that's your and Four Sigmatic's recommendation? Which one?
I think that's typically like the diction out there, but I'm also I'm in my own world. But yeah, like pretty like word on the street is like, yeah, you half your body weight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in some of the aggressive like build communities, it would be more than that. It's like your body weight in grams and stuff. I mean, that was a while ago, but to answer the question, which was on the page that I was looking at, of course, but protein is about 4 calories per gram.
Okay.
And yeah, I think you're right. The easy way is like, kind of eat half your body weight in grams of protein, which is so high. It's so high. Yes. And most of the recommendations that are sort of publicized are much higher than what we need. And more importantly, not just higher than what we need, but higher than what is healthy. And that is why I'm so amped up on this, because it's not healthy to overeat protein.
Yes.
And it's dangerous. And it's really, it's pretty clear scientifically that quality matters and quantity matters. And there's a limit over which it's detrimental to your health. And over and over again in the literature and, kind of below the meat and dairy industry marketing, you get the fact that it's very difficult to eat too little in this society. I mean, if you have malnutrition in general, then that's going to be a problem. But we need so little. To give an example of how much we need, it's like a couple of tablespoons of chia seeds is the minimum that our body needs to not lose muscle
per day.
Yeah. So we want more than that, generally, but the minimum is so low that people are worried about getting enough, and it's not hard to get enough, so generally, this is recommended. This is generally, for health, it's generally lower than what the like sort of common discourse is on it.
And not going too far down the rabbit hole of potential risks, but Merch is asking, what are you, in your opinion, what are the risks of eating too much protein? Or perhaps what could someone start to notice in their body if they're on that higher end?
I'll read one stat that I have. So health risks associated with high protein intake include a 75% increase in overall mortality and a 4-fold increase in cancer and diabetes mortality. There's a lot of association with it's sort of, so let's see, in Forks Over Knives, they call it like turning on the body's ability to create cancer or to support the spread of cancer in the body. And so they advise a low protein diet, because under a certain point, your body can't sort of turn on the cancer gene, if you will. So there's a lot of associations with cancer and diabetes and sort of overall longevity. I think that So if it's okay, if people do want to go deep, I do have all the studies on this in a piece that we can link to if you want, or we can share in some way so people can just go read the studies and see where it's backed up. But the tricky thing is that most of the risks don't show up right away, so you probably carry extra body weight, carry extra, muscle, or maybe feel a little bit slower or something, or you may feel totally fine and not know these things are putting you at a higher risk for a shorter life, basically. So I think that's one of the tricky things right now. You're seeing a ton of success with like the keto diet, and you don't necessarily notice that it can be detrimental to health until later on, if someone even, connects the dots. Is that clear and kind of top line enough?
Powerful. And I'll just remind everyone, that's something that's just read from other research, and we always encourage you doing your own research. So it's not like this will lead to this. It's okay, how can we look at all of the research that's out there and guide you to make the best decisions for your own health and your own life? Betsy has a follow-up question to that, and then we'll move on. Thank you all. There's so many fantastic questions coming in, but she's asking, is overdoing plant-based protein as potentially dangerous as having too much animal protein?
No, actually. And so let me read the line after that line from this study. So we have the 75% increase in overall mortality, ... These associations were either abolished or attenuated if the source of the proteins was plant-based. Huge difference. And that's why I'm like, switch. You're on this side on my screen, so it's like switch. Because if you're going to go protein, switching to plant-based makes a huge difference. Yeah. So it's not advisable to be high, but if you are pushing it, or you just want to be sure, that you're having a quality plant-based, big difference. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. And some people are asking if we can share some of the literature. So we'll give you all resources to connect with our Sigmatic customer support team, to reach out to Rachelle, so that we're setting you up for success, and we're guiding you towards where to look and how to look, and best practices for that. So great.
Yeah, question. I wanted to add something there. This is actually the only time that I've kind of written something and not written it. Like, none of it is mine. It's all a compilation of just research over time. And I entered this whole conversation without an agenda and without, meaning years ago, without an opinion on it, and was really a student of what does the science say? What do the, sort of forward thinkers in the space say? And the result of it is sort of what we're sharing, or what I'm sharing now. And it's just, here's the information. If you have more and it agrees or disagrees, let's bring it into the conversation, because the fact that we're having this conversation is really what's most important. Not to sound totally cliche, but it's true.
It is. Okay. There's so many questions. And I'm like, should we keep going through some of these?
I like the questions, but
Shelby is asking if you can share where the specific source of that information is coming from, if you're able to share that. And then Torin is asking what are reliable resources for furthering our own personal research.
Yeah. So, okay. So that specific study that I mentioned, actually, let's do this. So everything that I'm like looking at here is written up in one piece on my site, and it's just called like Protein 101, something like that. Perfect. And it's just the studies and the like quote study. So you can get them all there. And then I would say, go there for further reading. Also, I've mentioned it a couple times, but I think the documentaries are really good lately. The Game Changers, What the Health, Forks Over Knives.
Awesome. And they can go to Rachelle Robinett or Supernatural.
RachelleRobinett.com. And if you don't know what you're looking for, just Google protein.
Perfect. So Veronica's asking, and we'll keep repeating similar things to really hone in the point, but how do you calculate how much plant protein protein you need to consume to maintain and or gain weight?
So protein in terms of consumption and kind of quantity, it's equivalent in that sense. So we can say, you know, if you're trying to get 12% of your daily intake in protein, you know, that can be plant or animal. And of course we would advise that it's mostly plant, but you don't have to eat more plant to get, you know, what you're looking for, especially if it's a protein like for Sigmatics that's well, you know, designed, and it's got all the, but protein is protein in that sense.
Yes.
And if you're trying to, so the other thing that's really interesting is if you're trying to gain muscle, then what is best to increase muscle mass is strength training. Eating more protein doesn't mean more muscle. So strength training is more important, really. Now, if you're really high performing and you're burning through, you know, all of your calories and your body's using your muscle for fuel, then you can increase daily caloric intake, and with that, your protein intake. But you have to really be pushing it to need to increase protein, and eating more protein is actually not what people advise for building muscle, even though that sounds counter to some. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Danielle, do you have thoughts there?
Yeah, thanks. I just, the biggest thing for me is it's not just what you're eating that's going to contribute to your health goals. And so whether it's weight training, whether you're running and doing Pilates or doing yoga, we're not saying you can eat this amount of protein and that's perfect and you'll meet your health goals. It's one piece of the puzzle. And that's the beauty of holistic wellness and making sure that you're creating sustainable solutions for yourself, is take into account the way that you're moving. You know, what else are you drinking? What times of day are you eating? And all having it be part of the picture. Just like, you know, protein is now, you can look at it like 12% of your plate or your smoothie or whatever it might be. Take into account where you're at now, where you're trying to go, and then what pieces can contribute to that. So movement, you know, functional ingredients, macronutrients, your sleep quality, this is all playing into the picture. And something that I think is so overlooked when it comes to our health goals is like, you just need this one thing and you can eat this and you'll get there, when it's all interconnected. So you can be eating the same amount of protein, but if someone's working out or has a different goal, their results will be different. So yeah, thanks for bringing up both the goal piece and the movement piece to this picture. A lot of people are asking if we can give examples of what plants are good sources of protein, and a couple questions about our opinions on soy protein.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I love to surprise people with like broccoli as a good source of protein. You know, it's like we don't really think of that as high protein, but it totally is. Let me grab my exact number. I had broccoli tonight and I was like, oh, this is my high protein meal out of the protein event. Of course, so there's always spirulina and chlorella. So that, like the algae, which is, you know, plant-ish, but those are really great. They're they have all the 9 essential amino acids, about 60% protein. Their hemp is fantastic. Hemp hearts, hemp protein, hemp powder. Pea obviously is great, which is in there too. Like I mentioned, I really like broccoli. I think it's important to know that like one bunch of kale has about 9 grams of protein. And maybe you think, I mean, I don't know if you think this, but like, wow, who eats like a bunch of kale in one sitting? But like I just did. And you can, you know, and it cooks down to be very small. And then you're getting your plants and you're getting your protein, you know, and your plant-based protein. So it's really nice, like, to find it in these things that are so beneficial for our health, as opposed to like, it's an extra thing we have to add on. You know, we have to add protein to the veggie meal. We don't have to, especially knowing that we don't need a ton of it. and knowing that it's in, it's in broccoli, it's in cauliflower, it's in peas, it's in, lima beans. I have a whole big list here, but I don't think we have to like just do the quinoa and beans to get it. And I would say my personal favorite is broccoli and green peas. But I also don't intentionally pursue protein. I just let it be in my rotation, and that's worked really well. Soy, I'm not a fan of soy protein, but maybe I'll let you answer that one unless you want me to answer it.
Yeah, I'll get into soy in a minute, but I do want to address, Eve has a really great question, and she's saying that sometimes plant-based proteins for her are hard to digest, and the examples she gave are beans, rice, peas, etc. And so I love that you brought up broccoli as a source of protein, because so often when we look at like what are plant-based sources of proteins, they are more in this legume category, and depending on preparation, they can be, and source and quality, they can be a lot harder to digest. So we can talk about best practices, if you do love, whether it's your quinoa or your black beans, how to soak your beans or how to sprout your quinoa, and these ways to make it easier to digest. But also remembering that it's not just these kind of players that are more in the limelight that have protein, but that they're also in a lot of our leafy greens. For me, hemp seeds are for sure my favorite source of plant-based protein. And I love that we have it in our Sigmatic protein, along with things that, talking about things that you might not necessarily correlate with protein, is one of our 5 sources of protein in our plant-based protein is coconut, right? And pumpkin. And so there are these different amino acids in almost all of the vegetables and plants that we consume, but it's making sure that we diversify. And we could have a whole another 5-hour conversation about the microbiome and our gut health and how important that is. But I think you're all getting over and over again, Rachelle and I are like, how can we diversify, eat as many plants as possible? And you can take away a lot of the stress of, am I meeting my nutritional needs by eating as many different, my goal is always 30 different fruits or vegetables a week. And we're finding when it comes to the health of our microbiome, which is now often referred to as the mycobiome, because we're finding it's not just bacteria in there, there's also so many beneficial fungi. But it's diversity is the key. So, rather than meal prepping the same meal every single breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's how can you that's what really feeds our healthy gut microbiome and bacteria, is differing sources. And yeah, so, and when it comes to that, so that really speaks to my opinion on soy as well, which is in moderation. So it's not my favorite form of protein, but if it's something that works really well for you, and I find it so individualistic as well, and also the way that you prepare it is really important. So I've seen that in myself and a lot of my clients is, if you're eating a form in say tempeh, right, which is fermented and this very traditional in Indonesian culture, you may be able to digest it a little easier than if you were having just tofu or soy milk. And, with all of our foods, it's how can we listen to our own bodies? There's someone was asking about soy and women's health. And of course, there's phytoestrogens in soy. So if you are working, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or working on more of balancing your hormones, again, another webinar, but you might want to choose other sources that aren't soy. But diversity is key. Listening to your body is key. And yeah, if you want soy once in a while, perhaps looking at a form that might be fermented or is a little bit easier to digest than just that pure bean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I don't actually feel good when I eat beans and grains, so I don't. And it's like, you can do that, and you can get your protein, and you can get, even back to the early notes that we were speaking on, the amino acids, which your body builds protein out of. So.
Yes. So Heather asked this great question of, 1, can we please make the list of vegetable proteins available? And 2, how do we make these more appealing to children? And I'd love your stance, and then I'll give a couple of suggestions as well.
Well, the veggies that I rattled off are on that protein document that's on my website. You can Google like veggies that are high in protein, but I think you end up just getting like beans and rice for the most part, and like I don't know. You'll get hemp and chia probably too, but it's on my site. And you can also, any veggie you're wondering about, if you're eating it, just you can Google like how much protein is in 2 cups of kale, and it'll tell you. In terms of making it more appealing to children, I guess I'm wondering, are we making broccoli more appealing to children, or are we making protein powder more appealing to children? Because if it's broccoli, my mom's trick was always to add mayonnaise, and that went well because now I love broccoli and peas, which I ate with mayonnaise. Well, I'll skip to the easy part of that question, which is like, if it's a protein, here's what I would say actually. An easy way to make plant-based protein appealing to kids, I imagine, I don't have children, but I work with a lot of clients who do, is to use something like the 4 Sigmatic proteins that are such good quality and that taste great. Like obviously you're having a little like chocolate latte right now, and like I'll probably do that after this. That would be where I would start actually.
Yeah, I agree. And not to make it a plug, but I'm so excited that we have proteins now. It is something that people are always looking for, and to have such a clean protein with every ingredient being part of the synergy of the formula at large. As herbalists, we know that when you add one ingredient and you add another, there's either a contradicting or a beneficial effect, where the sum is greater than, or the end is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's really the deal when it comes to our plant-based protein is we left out, stevia, natural artificial flavors. So even the creamy cacao that I'm drinking, what makes it creamy is that there's organic coconut milk powder and organic, unrefined cacao, which is full of antioxidant properties and, debatably a superfood in and of itself. So beyond the protein, you can sneak this in. Like I literally blended this with some hot water and had a warm protein chocolate latte. But I'm finding a lot of our customers who are mamas are putting a scoop into pancakes in the morning, like into anything that they're baking, of course, making smoothie bowls, but the sky's the limit when it comes to something like this. And that also helps you meet yourself where you're at. It's like, what do you already cook? Let's try to make it really easy. And we're all stressed and looking for ways to make ourselves feel better and elevate the health of our families. And so this is really a great step in that direction. Okay, time went so quick, but you all had so many questions. I'm like, okay, trying to get to ones that we haven't answered yet. Some of these, okay. All right, I'm gonna go to some, I think we've done pretty well at answering some of these, but I'm gonna go through, okay. Let's see. Okay, a lot of people, I don't want to go too far down with our few minutes left, but there's been several of you that have been asking about Dr. Gundry's work and lectins and wanting to know our opinion on that when it comes to plant-based sources of protein. So maybe we can speak to that quickly.
Yeah, I like his work. I think his book got taken apart pretty thoroughly, and with good enough reason, but I think there's still a lot of sound information in it and that he presents. And lectins can be problematic for digestion, straight up. And you mentioned, Danielle, earlier that preparing things that are high lectin foods right is really important. And there's also the bean diet out there right now, the bean protocol, which is really popular. And long story short, I would say that, as I mentioned, like I personally avoid grains and legumes and some high lectin foods, not just because they're high lectin, that's one of the reasons, but it's not, where it started for me. And I think that, moderation is important, preparation is important, quality is important. And as we've been saying over and over again, the diversity is important, and you don't have to feel like you have to eat these foods. Or if you can't eat these foods, or you don't want to because you love Gundry's protocol, fine. You can get your protein in all these other places. So I think it's like either side of the fence that you're on is totally fine. Still do consider, quality and diversity and preparation. So yeah, I think there's some good truth in it. I practice it. I coach a lot of people through it. It's not specifically his protocol, but I do find that guts are so compromised right now that giving them extra challenge with a bunch of high lectin foods generally, is more problematic, and people feel really, really, really good when we take all of that out. And taking all of that out doesn't mean that you're left with no protein, because because of everything we said already.
Yeah, I agree. And I found personally and with clients that the time of year has been really dependent on what sort of plant-based protein sources I'm craving and that my body does well with. So I've also followed Gundry's protocol for a period of time and felt really good afterwards. And there's periods of time where, like, if I properly soak and prepare my beans or grains, I feel really great as well. The piece on quality here is critical. So I think, Rachelle, we've talked about this before, but really local, seasonal, organic produce as much as possible. And that's such a overlooked contributor of high lectins in our foods, is when they're sourced, when our produce is picked at its prime or close to its prime, and we're getting it in the vicinity of where we're living, there's so much more benefits that we get from our body. And the plant is of such a different quality than, something that's out of season that you get in a tomato in December, when you're living in Ohio or wherever it might be, right? So really small shifts, right? But start paying attention to what does grow seasonally. And a lot of people ask questions about traditional ways of eating. And up until, the past several decades, really, what was growing was what we were eating. So, I spent all weekend canning green tomatoes because it snowed here and I had to pick them from my garden. And so that's what I'm going to be eating lately. And what's ripe is what, we have this beautiful relationship with the natural world. And the more we can tune into that and start paying attention to what's growing around us and knowing that that is able to provide the nutrition that we need and maybe even beyond. So, okay, a few questions that I'll answer quickly that are more logistical are if there's any ways to get a sample of our Sigmatic protein. And there are. So we sell them in individual packets, $3.99. They come in a box of 10 if you buy them from our website. So soon in stores, and some stores already, you can buy a single packet. And then we have a policy so that if you purchase anything and you don't like it, it's on us. So even if you prefer to try a full canister and you don't like it, please just let us know, and there's no harm in trying. And then Caitlin, you're saying that you weren't able to find the protein on our website. It will be linked in the follow-up email that I send tomorrow. Okay. So many more things. I guess we have 1 minute. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to leave everyone with?
Oh my gosh, just to sum it up. I don't think there's anything that we didn't cover. There's just, the detail of it. But really, I think for me, I would say, I want people to be able to feel freed from this sort of requirement of the grams of protein and needing to read nutrition labels to see if it's high protein or if it's got, this amount, and just kind of look at, trust. I guess it's trust a little bit more too. Trust that a varied, high quality, mostly plant-based diet will give you life. And there's great science to back that up. And if you want, you want products, or you want, to make a quick like chocolate latte deliciousness that's high protein. Just choose something as excellent as what Four Sigmatic has done, because that decision will also give you life.
I love that. Thank you so, so much. We created a special discount code for all of you here with us tonight. It is protein webinar. So you can go to foursigmatic.com to use that and try out some protein. You can also go to, is it supernaturalcafe.com?
Just go to RachelleRobinett.com.
Okay,
It's all out from there. Our cafe website's a little complicated right now. So,
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Rachelle Robinett, and I will link all of this to the follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you all so much for being here. It's so inspiring to know that you're all so interested in this, and both of us are here to support you and be resources. So this is just the beginning. Please follow up with any questions you have. And thank you again, Rachelle. This was so wonderful.
Yeah, thank